A quadratic expression is an expression in this form: ax squared plus bn plus c. For example, let's take 2x squared plus 4x minus 3. So every quadratic expression has an a, and a usually is the coefficient of x squared. A is the coefficient of x squared, and b is the coefficient of x. B is the coefficient of x, and c doesn't have a variable. So every quadratic expression, it has 3 terms: the first term, the third term, the first term, the second term, and the third term. Now, if we can look at the first term has a variable that has a power. The first term has a variable that has a power. And then if we look at the second term, the variable doesn't have a power. And then if you look at the last one, which is our c doesn't have an x. So that's what a quadratic expression looks like. So for every quadratic expression, you have to know which value is your a, which value is your b, which value is your c, because usually those values, those are the values that we are mainly using in our calculations. Now, for the purpose of factorizing a quadratic expression, I'm going to classify our expressions into two. I'm going to classify our expressions into two. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. Let's say the first example, we have this expression, and then the second example, we have this expression. If we can look at these expressions, they look the same, but they are not the same. They look the same, but they are not the same. What makes them different is the coefficient of x squared. What makes them different is the coefficient of x squared. So if you look at the first expression, the coefficient of x squared is 1. The 1 is there, but it is not written. So as a student, like I've always been saying, you have to know that we don't write ones in mathematics, especially ones when they are adjacent to variables. But you just have to know that there is a 1 there. So in the first expression, the coefficient is 1. But here, the coefficient of our x squared is 2. Now, for this second expression, the coefficient can be any number greater than 1. As long as it's any number greater than 1, then it will fall into the second type of expression. So now, as we are factorizing quadratic expressions, we are going to factorize expressions that have a coefficient of 1 for the first term, and then we are going to factorize expressions that have a coefficient of more than 1 for the first term. So very important. So whenever you see a quadratic expression and you are asked to factorize it, firstly, look at the first term. Look at the first term and look at the coefficient of your first term and see if it's greater than 1 or it is 1. Now, for the purposes of making your life easier, in this video, I'm only going to look at factorizing a quadratic expression that has a coefficient of 1 in the first term. Then the next equation, we will address it in the next video. So let's take, for example, the same example that we just used, x squared minus 12. We said there's a 1 here. Now, to factorize all expressions where the coefficient of x squared is 1, we are going to use a method called the product sum rule. Product sum rule. Now, the product sum rule says you are going to be interested in your C and you are going to be interested in your B. From what I gave you initially, I told you that every quadratic expression, it has A, B, and C. Or C is the last number in your expression, but it's not always the case because the expression can be rearranged. But you just have to know, okay, which one is C? C is the one that doesn't have a variable, and B is usually the middle term and it has only one variable and the variable doesn't have a power, or the power is 1. So you are going to look at the last number and the middle number. Then you are going to look for two numbers which, when you multiply them, they are going to give you the last number. And those very numbers, when you add them, they are going to give you a sum of the middle number, which is -1 in this case. So I will repeat. Your concentration now should be on the last number and the middle number. The last number in our example is -12. The middle number is -1. So I'm saying the product sum rule says you are then going to look for two numbers which, when you multiply, they'll give you the last number, which is C. And then when you add them, they give you the middle number, which is your B. So you just have to look for those numbers. So those numbers are -4 and 3. So if we take -4 and 3, you multiply them, you're going to get -12. If you take -4 and add it to the 3, you're going to get your -1. So it means those are your two numbers that obey that rule. Then after you find those numbers, it's fairly simple. You are almost done. Open two sets of brackets. Insert x there, because in our equation we have x. Then insert those two numbers inside your brackets. The other number you put in the other brackets, the other number you put in the other bracket, and then you are done. That's your final answer. So that's how we factorize using the product sum rule. So I'll do another example. Let's take x squared plus 6x plus 5. We do the same thing. We look for two numbers which, when you multiply, they will give you a product of 5. But those very same numbers, if you add them, they give you a 6. I repeat, look for two numbers. You multiply them, they give you a product of 5. And then those very same numbers, you add them, they give you a sum of 6. Just find a way of finding those numbers. So those numbers are 5 and 1. 5 times 1 gives us a 5. 5 plus 1 gives us a 6. So which means the last thing that you can now do, open two sets of brackets, insert the variable in your equation, which is x in this case, then take your numbers, insert them inside the brackets, and then you are done. So you do that for all of them. Simple like that. Simple like that. But then I'll just make the last example. The last example, I'll take x squared minus 4x minus 12. We do the same thing. We look for two numbers, we multiply them, they give you negative 12, and then you add them, they give you a sum of negative 4. I want to believe that by now, you now know why our last number is 12, is negative 12, and it's not 12. And I want to believe that by now, you know why our middle number is negative 4 and not 4. But I'll just remind you in case you forgot. We said, if you have a minus sign in front of a number, automatically it makes that number a negative number. If you have a minus sign in front of a number, automatically it makes that number a negative number. Like in this case, we have minus 12, so it means our number is negative 12. So we have minus 4x there, so it means our number is negative 4. Then the next thing that follows, look for two numbers, you multiply them, they give you negative 12. But those very same numbers, you add them, they give you a negative 6. Those numbers are negative, let me see. Those numbers are negative, negative 6 and 2. Because negative 6 times 2 is going to give you the 12. Negative 6 plus 2 is going to give you the negative 4. And I said it's fairly simple. After you have found those numbers, just open your two brackets, insert the variable that is in question, then insert your two numbers. The other number you insert in the first bracket, the other number you insert in the other bracket. Now, remember, I said you only do this, or you only use the product sum rule if the coefficient of x squared is 1. Or alternatively, if your a is 1. That's when you use the product sum rule. If that's not the case, then it means you are going to do something else, which is what I'll show you in the next video.